Good evening, everyone. Most of you are not back from the feast, and therefore did not hear me say that. But the rest of you are back. Good to see you all. I guess we still have a few here from the feast. I wanted to make about 3 minutes of comments that could be given to everyone as soon as we're done here, within a few minutes. Many of you, perhaps most, maybe all of you, know that Israel finally hit Tehran and Iran last night. We got in, literally walked in, turned on the television and saw reports of strikes. 100 Israeli jets entered Iran airspace, flying up through first Syria. They struck a number of targets in Syria, continued on into Iraq, struck targets in Iraq, struck targets in about 7 different areas, and then went in and really hit Iran hard and then stopped. Now, most of you do not probably realize Israel is at war on 7 fronts. Only 9 million people, but they have this spectacular weaponry. But it ratcheted everything up. Now, the United States government told Israel not to hit the nuclear installations in Iran or their oil fields, or it would drive up prices all over the world for fuel, and that wouldn't be a good thing if you're trying to win an election. So do what's best for an American election, not what's best for Israel. So they didn't, and we'll see what Iran does now. That said, I wanted to also mention North Korea has sent thousands of soldiers into Russia to fight on behalf of Russia. South Korea is sending thousands of soldiers into Ukraine to fight with Ukraine. So now you literally have an enemy against an opponent, each with an ally, and both sides are backed either by NATO, Ukraine, or China, Russia. So it's the way wars develop. The Axis powers were a series of nations, Germany, Italy, and Japan, that formed one coalition. And they went up against the Allies in World War II. Wars develop into world wars because other nations either jump in or they're drawn in, or they're induced, they're kind of bought off to come in. Now, both sides of the Russia and Ukraine war involves mercenaries already, soldiers of fortune who are coming from around the world to fight on one side or the other, and they're paid to do it. So it's growing much more serious, and I want to make an interesting comment here about God's people. I don't know if God's people understand how serious things are going to get. When I talk to them, they seem to be talking about the kingdom. They should, but let me explain something. In the worldwide Church of God, we understood there was a 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. We knew that this thing called the Great Tribulation was coming. It actually is going to be much worse than the worldwide Church of God thought it would be. We didn't know how many nations or how many people on earth would be here, but we knew this thing called the Great Tribulation, Mark calls it great affliction, would precede the millennium. Now, we didn't know there was a kingdom in front of the Great Tribulation. And therefore, it never crossed anyone's mind they should look to see if there were a smaller tribulation or a smaller affliction before the kingdom that no one saw. Who could possibly go looking for a terrible period in front of a war that no one saw? We only saw the big millennial picture and the big tribulation, the great tribulation that preceded it. But I want you just to think about this, because we've been hearing a lot about, I've explained a lot about a kingdom that no one saw. But periodically, for about a year and a half, I've been telling you there's a serious period in front of that war. And the Bible refers to the Great Tribulation in Mark of those days, because there's another one. And Matthew refers to the Great Tribulation, and immediately after the Great Tribulation of those days, it's like there's another one. And I want to stress this to all of the brethren around the world. I have an idea when it may begin. I'm learning more about it, but it's going to be infinitely worse than most of us realize, and we're going to live through it. Now, I just sense that a lot of brethren They're watching for it. They think, okay, there might be a little, kind of like a flight where there's a little turbulence and maybe you fasten your seatbelt. But nobody really understands a world where all men, everyone, are so against each other that the world economy is shut down. I mean, the world economy is not shut down under the beast. It's a longer period. But I just would ask you to be aware of this. Walk with God. Stay close to God. I mentioned at the feast, I'm quite certain I know the date that this is over. I'm quite certain I do. And in the next weeks, I will lay out the foundation for giving you that date. But I also know that times are coming, a time is coming that is probably more terrible, maybe infinitely more terrible before that date, which is not a long way out, but it's not in the next week or two either. I will show you what the Bible says, as I mentioned in my last message, and you'll understand how plain it is. Then I'll prove it in about 40 ways. So there'll be no doubt in your mind or anybody's mind when this is over. But I wanted everybody to know the plan I have over the next, we'll just say next weeks. I don't want to say too much more than that. Not my intention any sooner than I need to give you that date. I will lay down the foundation so that when you receive it, as I said, I think a few days ago, it will be impossible to disbelieve it. Those are the things I ask all of the brethren around the world as your shepherd to be aware of. Now, once that attack occurred, things don't tend in this world to get better, they tend to get worse. How fast they get worse is hard to say. And I will tell you what I suspect when it's time to tell you that, in terms of when I think things are going to really turn south, and I mean hard and fast.